Welcome to this special edition of the YAHOWAH blog. We're going to be covering the news of the events. Today was a rather extraordinary day in the world, not only because of what Israel did as it tried to forestall its annihilation at the hands of the Iranian Islamic religious regime, but also as the world responded to it. So I'd like to share my thoughts on where we find ourselves at this time, particularly as the world erupted in hatred for Israel. As I surveyed some 50 different programs last night, depicting the events of the evening and again of today, they were 99% in opposition to Israel. And this is really an interesting phenomenon that we would find a nation trying to defend itself against obliteration to be so hated around the world. One of the things that was most troubling to me is the diminishment of Iran's nuclear program, as if the expert witnesses and talk show hosts that are pervasive in the mainstream media and in the world of social media have completely lost their capability of being moral or rational. And let's just speak to this for a moment. There is a 0% possibility that a nation like Saudi Arabia, like Iraq before it, or now Iran, has any interest in exceedingly complex and expensive nuclear power plants that are designed to boil water to make electricity, when they sit upon such vast reservoirs of natural gas and of oil that the oil exporting countries actually burn the natural gas just because it's a nuisance. So there is no possibility, none whatsoever, that a nation is going to develop a nuclear power plant or multiple plants because they want to have a civilian nuclear power generation program. Zero. Even to discuss it, even to hint at it, shows that the individual talking has no capacity to reason. Furthermore, the moment that Iran risked everything to enrich uranium beyond 3.5% uranium-235 fissile purity, they demonstrated to anybody that had half a brain functioning that their intent was to enrich uranium to the point that they could make nuclear bombs. When they reached 20%, it was overwhelmingly obvious. When they reached 60, there is no other explanation. And now they're at 90, which is the level necessary for a fission reaction. When a nation engages in all manner of centrifugal implosion technologies so that they can start this nuclear reaction, when they build a tritium plant to increase the yield, when they have enough uranium, and I know there's a lot of different numbers out here. Netanyahu said 9 bombs yesterday. Someone else said 15, and I say 30. And I'm not suggesting that my analysis is vastly superior to any others, but I have taken the time to go through the known quantities of uranium to 90% fissile purity that Iran has enriched, and I've taken the time to apply the yield boost of the tritium triggers that Iran now has, and have considered the 2 levels of bombs that a country can make with various levels of enriched uranium. and the level that would be necessary with a tritium trigger to have a bomb that would be appropriate for Iran to use at a neighbor, particularly a neighbor that is upwind from it based upon the way that the Earth rotates on its axis. They have already sufficient uranium-235 to 90% fissile purity with the augmentation of tritium triggers for 30 nuclear bombs. And they have the missile systems to deliver them. They even have the fuel for those systems, and they have done all of the testing on centrifugal explosions to detonate those bombs. That's where they stand. That is one of the reasons why, after having done the analysis, I said that Donald Trump and team had a 0% chance of being successful in their negotiations with Iran, which proved true every step of the way. So what Israel did last night, and again today, was an act of survival. There have been numerous countries, I don't know the total number now, but it's less than 10, that have a nuclear program. Most of those are developed based upon what was created in the United States to bring World War II in the Pacific to a close with Oppenheimer's work, and then sold on the black market by Americans to the Russians, because American Jew didn't trust America, and rightfully so, knowing that one nation with a nuclear capability is an exceedingly dangerous thing for the world. Because when only one nation had a nuclear bomb, that nation used it not once but twice. And so from the point that the Russians and the Americans had nuclear capability, and collectively they have about 90% of the world's nuclear weaponry today, China was not far along. The United States obviously helped the UK and France develop their weaponry. And then the black market and the internet and other devices distributed the information online, and the Saudi Arabians funded the Pakistani program, which gave Saudi Arabia access to nuclear bombs. So when they talk about their position, you need to know that the FBI, not the FBI, but the CIA has acknowledged what I've deduced many, many years ago, that the Pakistani program was funded almost entirely by the Saudi Arabians, and the deal was that the Saudis received bombs as reimbursement. This is where the world is in terms of its nuclear capability. There's also the Indians have a nuclear capability, and so do the Israelis. There's a difference in all of those countries and Iran, although there is not much of a difference between Iran and Pakistan, to be quite honest. The Pakistani program is a disaster, and America is the reason the Pakistanis were able to finish their bomb. It ran interference for the Pakistanis, provided military hardware for the Pakistani military to ward off all challenges. And then it is the reason why Saudi Arabia had the money to finance the program and didn't stand in the way of any of that from happening. And that country is in worse shape by a long shot than Iran, and belligerent as it relates to its expression of Islam. And so there is always the possibility that that program is going to run amok, that Islamic jihadists are going to have access to nuclear bombs, and that the Pakistanis are going to deploy them first against India. But this is where we stand, where there were some really horrible events a couple of weeks ago, where the US CIA and MI6 from the UK with CIA operatives throughout the Ukraine, coordinated the drone attacks on the Russian bomber fleet, its strategic bomber fleet, which was a direct violation of the SALT agreements, of the strategic arms limitation talks. And the U.S. not only knew it was going to happen, the U.S. caused it to happen.
Yeah.
And it is like saying, I want to play Russian roulette with a nuclear war. It was among the dumbest things Donald Trump and company have done. Now, there are those who say that Donald Trump is so out of touch with reality, so out of touch with what's happening in the world, that even though the United States and the CIA coordinated this, that there is the possibility that Donald Trump really didn't know it was going to happen just because no one talks to Donald Trump. It's anybody that has worked for Donald Trump will tell you that Donald Trump does not listen to anybody. You want to try to talk to him, he will talk over you. Nothing ever is considered by the man. He is just a walking hurricane of nonsense. So is it possible he didn't know? Yeah, I guess so. Which is why when he had the conversation with Putin, after this event, Putin lashed out at him and said, you know, what you have said and done has been really foolish. And this may be the dumbest of the dumb you have ever done. And you're going to post something about this conversation. You can post whatever you want. I'm not going to tell the world that I've told you off, but your country did this. It was in violation of SALT. And the only reason right now that you're not glowing is because I'm showing restraint. And it's true. Anybody that knows the Strategic Arms Agreement and the Russian deployment strategy as it results in a attack on its strategic forces, retaliation is the deterrent. And he didn't retaliate. So we have actually not Trump to blame and Putin to thank for the fact that the world is not in a nuclear war right now. All right, so we enter the next phase. Donald Trump stopped Israel from eliminating the Iranian nuclear program back at a time when it was obvious that they were within weeks of finishing the 60% to 90%, which is a very short duration. You can make enough uranium-235 for 15 bombs without tritium in approximately 1 to 2 weeks' time. 4 weeks' time. With tritium, you can take the uranium that they had enriched to 60% fissile purity to 90% for the bombs. So 2 weeks, 30 bombs, particularly augmented by tritium. That's where we were 6 weeks ago. The Israelis knew it. Most of the watchdog agencies for atomic energy and its use knew it. It had been pretty well disseminated throughout the intelligence community. Donald Trump, though, had been bought and was now owned, was a little puppet by MBS in Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Took $16.5 billion worth of bribes, but it's more than that, as I've talked on other programs. And they told him not to bomb Iran. Go talk with them instead. Well, a waste of time through Omar. And we knew it was a waste of time. I told you explicitly that it was a waste of time, and it turned out to be a waste of time. And that time was the time that finished the program. And then Israel one more time said, we want to deal with this. And Trump not only said, hell no, but he released his their request and his denial to the New York Times just to humiliate Israel.
He's so disgusting.
And then, when he had Netanyahu in the Oval Office, and they were talking about the strategies that the two countries would deploy going forward, Donald Trump did the unthinkable. He blindsided Netanyahu during a press conference and said that he is beginning direct negotiations with Iran. That wasn't even true. But nobody in
maybe-
their right mind just blurts that kind of thing out, and you haven't talked to the target of that nuclear program. It was one of the most astonishing things I had ever seen a supposedly responsible person do. And I did a number of essays, both the written and oral, to demonstrate just how foolish that was. And what Donald Trump had stated was that if Iran did not capitulate, he would bomb them as no one has ever bombed them before.
What a liar.
And then when it didn't happen, when Iran says, hell no, we're not going to do that, we are not going to comply, the answer is no, absolutely not. Did he do as he had promised? Or was Trump the same guy that he's always been his entire life? All bluster, but no boom. When it actually comes to it, the man lacks a pair. He almost never follows through. He's had a dozen of these so far. The last one was he was going to bomb the Houthis, as they've never been bombed before, and to make certain that there was freedom of passage of ships in the Gulf, and that Israel wasn't being attacked by the Houthis again. He got his clock cleaned. America lost airplanes, they lost drones, they spent billions of dollars and got nothing from it. The Houthis were laughing at us. And finally, the only escape was declare victory and leave. And he was right. The Houthis said that they wouldn't attack American ships if the American ships weren't there. And he just left. And of course, the thought that they wanted to say is that America needs its bombs because it needs to reposition its military from this theater over to contain China, as if that were possible. I mean, the U.S. can't contain Russia, and Russia has come to own NATO and the United States, and you think now you're going to go after China. But this is the place we find ourselves, and Israel made the determination that this was a different set of circumstances than had ever existed before, and I want to share the other part of it. So we know that the Iranians were developing their nuclear program for a single purpose, making bombs, and there was a single target, Israel. And we know this because this is something that nobody wanted to talk about yesterday, is the Ayatollah and his cadre of generals and advisors and pretense of politicians routinely shout the death to Israel, death to America. Their goal has been the destruction of Israel, obliteration of Israel. They funded Hamas to do that. They funded Hezbollah to do that. They fund the Houthis to do it. They're actively engaged doing it. They threaten routinely to do it. And now they were building a nuclear arsenal to accomplish it. Israel's choice was go ahead, let them finish, we'll wait and see if Iran continues to be the same old Iran that it's always been as it relates to this Islamic regime, and to have Israel wiped off the face of the earth, or to do their best to take out the Iranian nuclear bomb-making program, which is what they did. And which is what they're attempting to do. We know that there has been significant damage at Nance. We do not know if there has been a single strike at Fordor. We know that some of their Mitchell manufacturing facilities have been attacked. We don't know if they've attacked the tritium plant. We have a very incomplete assessment of what they've attacked. Of course, they've taken out the top brass of the Iranian military. They had one situation where the top general was taken out. He was replaced, and his replacement was taken out by the Israelis a matter of 2 hours later. So this is where we stand. and I want to speak a little bit about the world as we find it. Our planet has become increasingly chaotic and dangerous. It is rife with all manner of ideological deceptions, both political and religious, also militaristic, and now in social media, exceedingly guttural. Planet Earth is being set up for cataclysmic devastation. The rhetoric is shrill, truth is rare, intelligence is scarce. Last night, Israel acted to preserve its right to exist. It did so against a religious state whose unambiguous and constant message has been to destroy Israel, obliterating the nation. This has been the sole purpose of the Islamic Republic's nuclear program and uranium enrichment. We do not yet know the extent of the IDF's success in burying the Iranian ambitions. But we know that there will be ongoing strikes. There are even today. And there will be an unrestrained retaliation. If you are Jewish, there is a target on your head. Survival must now be your overriding concern. We are fully aware that Muslims achieved the objectives of Al-Aqsa flood on October 7th, 2023. Islamic jihadists were so savage in their rapes, mutilations, abductions, and murders, as well as their manipulation of the hostage deals, that Israel's anticipated and unrelenting retaliation in Gaza has backfired and has turned the entire world against Jews, just as the Muslim strategists anticipated. The victims of Islamic terrorism, ruthless apartheid, and complete genocide are now incorrectly perceived as the perpetrators. The victims are being shamed, the perpetrators glorified. When religiously motivated terrorism and death lurking in every corner of the globe, with the most murderous confessing to their crimes by shouting Allahu Akbar, with a river of blood comprised of 200 million deceased and enslaved people flowing from beneath Muhammad's feet, and with the Quran overtly and undeniably declaring war against all mankind. Ignorance of Islam has become inexcusable and fatal. Such is the reason YAHOWAH insisted that I write Goddamn Religion. It is mankind's last and best hope to survive this plague. Worldwide, Marxists and Muslims have aligned against Israel, becoming vastly more violent and threatening in their anti-Semitism than the Nazis or even the right-wing religious conspirators before them. Previously, it was Roman Catholicism, with its dehumanizing demonization of Jews, emblazoned in its New Testament, fostered the climate that enabled the Holocaust. Now Islam, with its diabolical and deadly Quran, its terrorizing deity, is now serving in that role. Also, as was the case a century ago, the violent anarchy of Muslims and Marxists has become a catalyst for world war. This is our world and 2025, year 5992. Yeah. We're on the threshold of the Shabuah harvest and the beginning of the time of Yaakov's troubles. So while we will continue to explain how these unfolding events were foretold by the prophets, and reminding Israel that she has been forewarned, our primary mission remains unchanged. We are here to reintroduce Yahweh to Yehudim and to return David, our Messiah and King, the Son of God and our Savior, to his rightful position over Israel and planet Earth. I appreciate your attention in this matter. At this point, I would like to read perhaps the most inane tweet ever twittered. It is from the President of the United States, or his locker room golf club attendant. My wife chuckles, but she doesn't actually know that the gentleman that is responsible for Trump's tweets is actually a man that was once a locker room attendant at one of the golf clubs that Trump owned. That likable fellow, but he is now the person in charge of such things. I hate to besmirch his character. Let's blame it on Trump. This is what he wrote. I gave Iran chance after chance to make a deal. I told them in the strongest words to just do it. But no matter how hard they tried, no matter how close they got, they just couldn't get it done. I told them it would be much worse than anything they know, anticipated, or were told. That the United States makes the best and most lethal military equipment anywhere in the world. By far. In all caps.
What an arrogant ass.
And that Israel has a lot of it. With much more to come. And they know how to use it. Certain Iranian hardliners spoke bravely, but they didn't know what was about to happen. They are all dead. Capital D, capital E, capital A, capital D, and now. And it will only get worse. There has already been great death and destruction, but there's still time to make this slaughter with the next already planned attacks even more brutal come to an end. Iran must make a deal before there is nothing left and save what was once known as the Iranian Empire. No more death, no more destruction, all in caps. Just do it before it's too late. God bless you all. Exclamation point.
What? This is his locker room attendant prior? Oh my God. And you didn't want to besmirch this man's character? It's obvious he's as big a buffoon as Trump is. Ugh.
He is responsible. The locker room attendant is responsible for Trump social. That doesn't mean that he's actually writing these. The grammar is so poor, syntax so bad, that I want to give Trump credit because he speaks at about the same level as these things are written. So it is Trump's voice. I responded. The unreal Donald Trump. then I use that title because he puts everything out with this red, white, and blue thing that comes down his face on Trump Social, which is called our Truth Social, I guess is the name. What a terrible name for it. Under the real Donald Trump. Yeah. As if there's a fake one. If you want to meet the real Donald Trump, it's going to be in social media. So I titled this The Unreal Donald Trump. This morning's tweet from the real Donald Trump was moronic in the extreme. 1, Iran does not trust Trump and won't even negotiate directly with the United States. The inference, therefore, is untrue. 2, there was never any chance of a nuclear deal with Iran. The uranium was already enriched. The tritium was made. The missiles were at the ready. 3, just do it. Is an old advertising slogan.
From Nike.
Not a sane diplomatic negotiation tactic dealing with nuclear proliferation, especially by a genocidal and religious regime. 4, Iran never tried hard in these negotiations, never got close. That's not only obvious by the inept Oman intermediaries, the indirect talks, the infrequent and short meetings, but also by proliferation of repudiations and denials. 5, Trump didn't say anything directly to the Iranians. And the world has long since grown callous of the worse than anything threats that Trump never fulfills. He is the Chicken Little of the sky is falling. 6, the United States military equipment was bested by the Houthis and has been completely negated by the Russians. America has lost all of its recent military engagements. Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Somalia, Sudan, Libya, Yemen, and Ukraine.
And yet she's still arrogant.
7, the reason Trump didn't do as he had promised and bomb Iran as they have never been bombed before is because he knows that the U.S. military is now inept. It failed against the Houthis. 8, Israel knows how to use some of the U.S. military's hand-me-downs. And while the IDF is effective in this way, Israel has been, and it remains inept at deflecting and defeating a massive, lightly armed jihadi force on foot, like Alaska Flood. It's not about who makes the best weapons or who knows how to use them. The strategy has changed. 9, religious foes cannot be intimidated with taunts, which is how this tweet reads. They become even more belligerent. 10, what's worse than dead? 11, hasn't been great death in the Israeli strike, only targeting high-ranking military and nuclear scientific personnel.
It's very surgical.
12, it has yet been disclosed if there was destruction of the nuclear enrichment sites. You can say, well, the U.S. has the best satellite technology in the world. We can see what was destroyed. No, you can't. You can't penetrate the ground. You have no idea at this point whether 200, 300, 400 feet beneath the ground where this is taking place, if those facilities were destroyed or not, or if they just scarred the surface. We don't know. Israel doesn't even know at this point. 13. This slaughter didn't happen. And it's inflammatory and it's counterproductive language. It is also inappropriate to call precision targeting of military leaders devoted to Israel's annihilation, their nuclear and missile facilities, as brutal. You want brutal? Look what happened to Israel when Muslims invaded on 10/7. That's brutal.
Yeah.
14. Why did Secretary of State call the Israeli strike unilateral? And then Trump say exactly the opposite the next morning? 15. It is grossly irresponsible for the president to say the next attacks are already planned. You know, you got to somehow learn that if lives are at stake, you got to keep your yap shut. Or no one will tell you anything. Not that you listen anyway. 16. It is senseless to say Iran must make a deal before nothing is left. Senseless. Both sides announced that there was no deal in the offing, and Israel doesn't have the capacity or the desire to destroy Iran. Israel doesn't want a war with Iran. They've got no battle with the Iranian people. They're just trying to take out a regime that is devoted to their destruction and the tools that would be used to annihilate them. Turns out, Israelis don't much like the idea of glowing with a nuclear strike. 17. Iran is a nation. It's not an empire. There was no Iranian empire. Persia was an empire. 18. Telling an Islamic regime no more death, no more destruction is akin to telling them that they cannot continue to be Muslims. 19.
Oh, so true.
Who is Trump's God supposed to be blessing? The Iranian Allah worshippers to whom the tweet was twittered?
Maybe the nukes.
20. Social media presidents are for the ignorant, irrational, and immoral. But this is obviously the real Donald Trump. I mentioned the statement from Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and I'm here to tell you that I'm laying odds. I'll give you 5-1 that Marco Rubio will not be the Secretary of State of the Trump administration by the time it passes its halfway mark. Matter of fact, if you'll notice, there is nobody that was part of Trump 1.0 that's part of Trump 2.0.
Nope.
No one.
Not even the wife.
No one. Not even the wife. My wife says, and that's true.
She quit also.
She's still legally married to him, but it is a totally transactional arrangement. When she infrequently visits the White House, she is considered a guest.
Yep.
Tonight, Israel took unilateral action against Iran. We are not involved in strikes against Iran. And our top priority is protecting American forces in the region. Israel advised us that they believe this action was necessary for its self-defense. President Trump and the administration have taken all necessary steps to protect our forces and remain in close contact with our regional partners. Let me be clear, Iran should not target U.S. interests or personnel. Unilateral. The
Rubio.
U.S. not involved.
Yeah.
Our priority is protecting American forces. Israel advised us, and what did we do? We had all American personnel leave the region. We told you that this was coming. We betrayed Israel. We told you when it was going to occur. You notice he didn't agree that this was in Israel's self-defense, and that he claims the administration of Donald Trump has taken all steps to protect American forces and to remain in close contact with our regional partners, which would be Saudi Arabia and Qatar, the United Arab Emirates. Oh, and now and Jalani of the Islamic State, because he is, well, a handsome character.
Terrorist in a suit.
He's our pocket terrorist.
Hmm.
Let's be clear, Iran should not target U.S. interests or personnel. Said nothing about Israel.
Of course not.
My assessment, not only did Trump Rubio this morning with the real Donald's tweet saying that the United States supplied all of the weapons, know-how, admit that he was involved in the planning by knowing what Israel was going to do next. It's amazing to see a U.S. official say that Israel took unilateral action and then read that his only concern is over Iran targeting U.S. interests and personnel, not Israel. It was just 2 days ago that I wrote and posted the following. It's related, albeit not entirely on the same subject, same player, same president. It's called The Betrayal of Israel, The Art of the Deal. Donald Trump is the new Neville Chamberlain. Israel is his Czechoslovakia. MBS is his Hitler. Muslims are his Nazis. And World War III will be his consequence. When this is imposed, the genocidal rage of Muslims will be emboldened. Israel will be indefensible. 1,000 times 10-7 will occur. And millions of Jews will die. Define reason. 66% of Israelis are going to support Trump's plan to carve an Islamic State out of the heart of Israel. They will do so because the remaining 20 living and 30 dead hostages will be returned. This phase of the war will end. They foolishly crave normalization with Saudi Arabia because they are universally ignorant of Islam. And they moronically trust Trump's worthless promises of security. They also value the bombs Trump provided to assure this unfortunate result. And it will be in collective national suicide. The Trump-Saudi-French plan to establish a Fakistanian state of terror, which will take place in New York next week, is being orchestrated by Donald Trump because it was required by MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, in payment for the bribes that he had provided to Donald Trump and the continuation of the petrodollar. The UN's plan is not focused on rewarding Donald Trump with a Nobel Prize and does not pay the Saudis back. And so Trump doesn't like it very much. Donald Trump is committed to betraying Israel, but since he does not share credit or play nicely with others, He is willing to threaten any nation that interferes with his desire for this Nobel Prize. As for guaranteeing Israel's security, those words are as contrived as the Nazi attendant telling the Jewish child entering the showers at Auschwitz that he'll hold the towel for the lad and assure that their clothes aren't stolen. This is the betrayal of Israel that Isaiah foretold would be the consequence of U.S. belligerence, saying so in his 17th and 18th, 2,700 years ago, with implementation occurring before Shabat and May 2026. I was not only the first person to deduce this from the prophecy, but have shared it with you, not only in writing, in my books on the website, but also as part of the YAHOWAH blog. It is why I announced the Friday after the U.S. elections in November, declared that Donald Trump would be the next president of the United States, that it was Donald Trump who would be this next Neville Chamberlain and betray Israel. The prophets are never wrong. The Trump administration has dispatched cables to governments worldwide this past week, dictating that they must not engage in the anti-Israel actions ahead of the French and Saudi-organized conference to advance a Palestinian state. U.S. President Donald Trump is insisting on the two-state solution between Israel and the so-called Palestinians, according to a U.S. cable seen by Reuters and other news agencies. But it does not want the UN to interfere. The diplomatic cable sent on Tuesday says countries that take anti-Israel actions following the conference will be viewed as acting in opposition to U.S. foreign policy interests that could face diplomatic consequences from Washington. In other words, Trump is saying, my agenda for this prize and to be the one who betrays Israel is so important to me. If you achieve what I want achieved, but you take credit for it, I'm going to bring the wrath of the United States against you. That's how far we've fallen. And what's amazing is that because of Donald Trump sending in the Marines and the National Guard to quell a tiny riot by leftovers from Black Lives Matter and Antifa, I guess he finally found a foe that the U.S. military can defeat. It'll be the first victory of the U.S. military should they pull it off in better part of a century. But that is his plan. Between that and now this with and Israel, no one's paying attention to what was hidden. In fact, Trump didn't even bother to announce it. Sent out the cables, but didn't release those cables to the press. Never mention it on one of his tweets. So the cable seeks to put Israel's fate in the hands of the Trump administration and its two close allies, France and Saudi Arabia, who are co-hosting the gathering next week in New York that aims to lay out the parameters for this Palestinian state. Now, let me be clear. The myth of Palestine was created as an ethnic slur to perpetrate genocide on Jews by Hadrian in 133 CE. The province of Judea, he renamed as he was torturing hundreds of thousands of Jews and initiating the diaspora, sending Jews out as slaves. And he did so just as a ethnic slur. It was an insult. It was a way of slandering those he was tormenting. It was victim shaming. That's its origin. It was only maintained by the anti-Semitic British, who maintained that terrible ethnic slur. And then it was resurrected by a contingent of Marxists and Muslims. The KGB, that was still active at the time in the 1960s, and the Muslim Brotherhood, to create the Palestinian Liberation Organization by immediately calling all Muslims from Egypt, Jordan, Syria that were anywhere around the newly formed state and the successfully defended state of Israel, Palestinians. And because the world didn't push back on the stupidity of that, because the world is so easy to fool today, because so many people are just irrational, immoral, the slur stuck. And so there's going to be a Palestinian state, which is an ethnic slur to perpetrate genocide, making Israel indefensible. Of course, the promise is that they will ensure Israel's security. Can you imagine? You're going to trust Donald Trump, who doesn't even know what he's going to say one day to the next. He doesn't even remember what he said 15 minutes ago. He's going to trust the man who has reneged on every promise he's ever made. And Macron, of all people in France, whose own wife whacks, who has already said that he wants to reward the Muslims with this condition, and who couldn't defend their own country. You know, this is the French salute. And Saudi Arabia, the birthplace of Islam, where every Jew in Arabia was murdered or raped or sold into slavery by Muhammad. Some 40,000 of them over a 10-year period. The first 10 years of the Islamic era perpetrated wholesale genocide against the Jews, apartheid, raped all the women, sold all the children into slavery, murdered all the men. And that is going to be the country guaranteeing your security, Israel. We are urging governments, this cable said, not to participate in the conference, which we view as counterproductive to ongoing life-saving efforts to end the war in Gaza and free the hostages, read the cable. Not to make Israel secure. Not so that Israel can defend itself from those who perpetrated such savagery on it. All Trump wants to do, and the Muslims want to do, and that this will do, is force the end of the war, which Trump has already said that war is over. Stop it. And the Israelis are going to go along because they're going to get 20 living hostages and 30 dead Jews back. 20 lives for millions. And all the people said, yay! Let's commit suicide. It'll be great. French President Emmanuel Macron has announced that France would recognize a Palestinian state in the West Bank and in Gaza. The U.S., for decades, backed the two-state solution between Israelis and Palestinians that would create a state for these Fakistinians in Judea and Samaria and in Gaza, alongside Israel. No, it wouldn't be alongside. It would be right through the very heart of Israel, a dagger to the heart. Trump in his first term was relatively tepid in his approach to the two-state dissolution, a long-time pillar of U.S. Middle East policy, right? Because the Muslims had the oil, and our loyalty is to our pocketbooks. The Republican president has given little sign where he stands on the issue in his second term. Oh, no, that's no longer the case. He has given you every sign that he's going to betray Israel. Obviously out of the loop on Tuesday of this week, U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, I'm a talk show host and evangelical pastor, said he did not think an independent Palestinian state remained a U.S. foreign policy goal. Ha! And the Israelis said, oh, isn't that sweet of you? We love you, Mike. I played for a fool. However, asked Wednesday whether the Trump administration no longer supports the two-state solution, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt dodged the question. No, she really didn't. She answered it. While asserting that Trump's top priority is to end the war in Gaza and free the remaining hostages. Well, freeing the remaining hostages is fine, but not if Israel has to commit suicide to get it done. We don't worry about that. Trump views the situation in Israel and Gaza as deeply unfortunate and needing to end. Leavitt said during a press conference, the president is realistic about the current state of affairs in the region. Yeah, that his buddies, the Muslims, have all the money because they got all the oil and they outnumber Jews. That's why the president has said that the number one focus and priority of his administration is to release all of the hostages from Gaza and to end this conflict as soon as possible. Every place we turn, the President of the United States is saying, you can't fight for your own self-defense anymore. It's over. What does that mean? They can't continue the conflict in Gaza. It means that Hamas stays in power. It means Hamas stays armed. It means that Israel loses the ability to keep weapons out of Gaza. It means that Alaska flood prevailed, that Israel not only lost the 1,200 lives of that day and the lives of so many of its hostages returned dead, but also the troops that went into battle. It was all in vain. Well, that's what it means. There's no other spin for it. And when that war ends and Hamas got what they wanted, the antagonism towards Jews, you think it's bad now? You wait. Unilaterally recognizing a Palestinian state, said the president's press secretary, unilaterally recognizing a Palestinian state would effectively render October 7 as Palestinian Independence Day. That is how also the cable read, referring to when Hamas terrorists carried out the cross-border attack on southern Israel in 2023, killing some 1,200 people and taking 250 hostages. Hamas's attack triggered Israel's air and ground offensive in Gaza, which more than 55,000 people in the Strip have been killed or presumed dead, according to the Hamas figures. I have gone through this before. About 20% of the dead do not have any documentation, no evidence whatsoever regarding their fatalities. 20,000+ of that are enemy combatants. These are Islamic terrorists that were
Playing jihad.
were playing jihad and were killed as a result of playing jihad, deserving to die. And it did not take into consideration the normal mortality rate in the Gaza Strip, which is actually quite high. So somebody died of natural causes, as people in a 2.2 million population do. They were called part of the death toll. The actual number isn't 55,000. If you pull out the jihadists who should have been killed, you pull out the natural deaths, the normal mortality numbers, and you pull out the 20% that are completely undocumented with no validation for them at all, the number is closer to 10,000. And when you consider how these savages acted, the fact there's been no remorse for what they've done, the fact that they celebrated the rapes, tortures, and mutilations, and abductions, and murders of Jews. And then that the Israelis sacrificed the blood of their soldiers to preclude Gazans from dying and warned the Gazans when they were going to attack to minimize the effectiveness of the attack. And then fed them and gave them power and gave them water and gave them medicines. When the Gazans were manufacturing their next terrorist raids, planning it, keeping their weapons underneath schools and hospitals. It is astonishing that that few people were killed. And there really is no such thing as a civilian in Gaza. Nope, never. I mean, none. I mean, even the youngest are just baby vipers. You know what the likelihood is that in a culture that indoctrinates its children from birth to kill Jews, what is the likelihood that a baby viper is going to turn out to be a bunny rabbit? Zero. Absolutely. If Macron went ahead, France, home to Europe's largest Muslim and Jewish communities, would become the first Western heavyweight to recognize the Fakistanian state. This would, of course, lead to greater momentum and dominate the continent's resolve, making it ever more critical of Israel. Macron's stance has shifted among Israel's intensified Gaza offensive. It was suicidal when Netanyahu said, I'm going to go back into Gaza after the last hostage deal. It was just suicidal. It's bombing Gaza into oblivion has turned the world against Israel to the extent that it was suicidal. I understand the rage. I understand the justification. I understand the professional nature of the IDF, but it doesn't change the fact it was suicidal. So there, of course, now is a global push to create this Fakistanian state. And then there's this myth that somehow Israeli settlers are part of the problem. Last time I did the review, the number of attacks by Israeli settlers on Muslims in Judea and Samaria was 60-1 over the attacks of Muslims against Jews, and that was before 10/7 of 23. It's probably 100-1 now. The U.S. cable said that Washington had worked tirelessly with Egypt and Qatar, Israel's enemies, the Bank of International Islamic Terrorism, to reach a ceasefire deal in Gaza to free the hostages and end the conflict. So consider yourselves blindsided and betrayed, Israel, even though I have made you aware of this result and timing since November. You were played by Trump. Shame on you. And all the while, Netanyahu played into the betrayer's hands. Let's be clear. Trump is this reincarnation of Neville Chamberlain. Not as polished, but nonetheless as foolish. Israel is his Czechoslovakia, MBS is his Hitler, Muslims are his Nazis, and World War III will be his consequence. When this is imposed, the genocidal rage of Muslims will be emboldened. Israel will become indefensible 1,000 times. Al-Aqsa flood will occur, and millions of Jews will die. Of these things I have always been certain, because the prophets revealed this to us. Let it also be known, Israel, that when the IDF was sent back into Gaza, expecting a different result, with war objectives that were and remain unobtainable, the continued destruction of Gaza made this result inevitable. Netanyahu must go. On a different subject entirely, I have a couple of other posts that I would like to share with you verbally that I have written earlier today or yesterday. The first is entitled, Sending in the Marines. After losing in Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Syria, against the Houthis and Iran, and in the Ukraine, Donald Trump, auditioning as Der Fuhrer, apparently found an enemy the U.S. military can vanquish. Democrats. Thinking it through. Israel's hearty congratulations on the Iranian strike without losing any aircraft. The beeper bombs, it's genius. Demolishing Gaza was a powerful display. But have you considered the consequence? Israel has become the most hated nation on earth. As a result, the imposition of an Islamic state carved out of the heart of the nation for Fakistinians is imminent, and it is inevitable. This will make Israel indefensible. And even prior to this, there is no indication that the IDF is any better prepared for Al-Aqsa Flood 2.0, which will be at least 100 times worse, more likely 1,000, than it was the last time.
I don't think there's a military in the world that's prepared to face jihadists.
My wife said, I don't think there's a military in the world that's prepared to deal with the flood of jihadists. And it doesn't matter what exists in the rest of the world. There's only one place that's going to endure that, Israel. And Israel has a military that is geared to do what it did today, fly missions. It has tanks. It has Apache gunships. It has a dome. That's the Iron Dome. It has some of the best fighters and fighter pilots in the world. None of that has any value in forestalling Al-Aqsa Flood 1.0 or 2.0. None. And this is what's going to happen to Israel next. And because the IDF cannot defend it, Israel is indefensible. And this next time it's going to be infinitely worse. Infinitely worse. I mean, it's not just that Muslims are going to race across the border from Gaza, but also from now Fakistan, right in the heart of Israel, and from Judea and Samaria, and from Lebanon, and Turks and Syrians, bolstered by the Islamic State's control and Turkish involvement in Syria. They're going to rush down from Syria. There'll be an onslaught from Jordan. They will come through Saudi Arabia. They will be augmented by Egyptian jihadists. It will be 100 times to 1,000 times more jihadists. The rain of missiles, drones, and rockets will be well over 100,000, hugely beyond the capacity of the Iron Dome. This is what's going to happen. So the bad news, by fighting a religious foe incorrectly, it appears that all Israel has done is to make a very bad situation much worse. Sort of like the United States did in Afghanistan, in Libya, and in Iraq, as well as Syria. So under the circumstances, you may want to read Goddamn Religion before it is too late. The good news, Yahowah and Dode will resolve all of this the moment you return to them. And I'll be glad to make introductions. That's the purpose of the 35 volumes of Yada Yahowah. This morning I arose thinking about just how strange what we're witnessing is. We're witnessing chaos by fool thunkery. It is the most perplexing period, probably in world history. Let me share my thoughts in this regard. Never in the long history of civilization has one man been so chaotic and destabilizing. The opposition is punch drunk and staggering, while the MAGAs are genuflecting. Each week, sometimes twice in the same week, there is a crisis of unprecedented proportions. We're not even 5 months into the second term, and the craziness is epic.
Yeah.
It's akin to a 13-ring circus with clowns juggling grenades amidst lions, tigers, and bears. All the while, the wizard of Twitter has the world so confused, there is no time to plan or address the previous calamity before a score more are contrived. This is the Gatling gun of death under the hail of 1,000 bullets. It would be a fool's folly to believe that Trump was sufficiently strategic to have planned out the Earth's demise, as he is worshipped as a god and denounced as the devil. And yet, his propensity for dunderheadedness and catastrophe are so impressive. He is the mouth without constraint. He's the nuclear arsenal of blabber. And it is now evident that he does not know or cannot even remember what he has said one day to the next. And all the while, America is quickly approaching a comic, albeit tragic version of 1920s Russia, 1930s Germany, 1940s China. Billions will be caught in his many nets, struggling to survive in a world that he is savaging for his amusement. Thinking it through, Israel, it is something that you ought to have pondered, that you have been played, and that you've been so naive in your willingness to trust a man that is going to betray you, that it reminds me of the Exodus, where even Moshe turned on you. Moshe said, I can't deal with these people. Nobody can lead them. They're impossible. They're way too obstinate. And this is what we're witnessing. and Israel. A nation that has turned its back on God, has erased his name, has no role for the Messiah, Son of God, former and returning King and Savior in their lives. This would be David. They did not listen to God 3,500 years ago. They're not listening to Yahweh now. And Israel, you are 1 year away from the beginning of the time of your troubles. 2 out of every 3 Jews are going to die. Your back's up against the wall. Your own rabbis are your own worst enemy. The Marxists on the left have lost all contact with reality. Your enemies are going to flood in and have their way with you. And there's only one solution for you. Return to Yahweh. Re-engage, Dode, in your national identity. I'd be happy to make introductions. I thank you for listening. I am Craig Winn. This has been a special news update as part of the YAHOWAH blog.